this talk is the first time I give this as a talk, but the story is a few years old. So this was something that happened, I think it was 2017, so pre-pandemic. Keep that in mind when you see some of the images. I'm going to take you through the process that we went in this company that we started using LeSS for a specific project. It was a water management company in Barcelona. So, let me first introduce myself. I'm Adrian. I do consulting, certified Scrum trainer. I do currently classes at university, business schools, and in like Agile and scaling specifically, education. I did a PhD in artificial intelligence when it wasn't cool, like 10 years ago. And now I'm like, shit, should have waited. Anyways, I worked for a bunch of big companies, and it's not here. Anyways, okay, enough about me. Okay, so the talk is, I'm going to present the problem, so why they needed help in this company. Then what I propose, and I'll take you through the whole step-by-step of how we did it, including LeSS. Part of it was the Inception, for which I have a bunch of pictures. So the presentation is 500 megabytes. There's a lot of pictures in there. And it failed, so it didn't work out. But we learned a lot of stuff. I learned some stuff. And I think failure, if it's quick, is a good thing. So we failed pretty miserably quick. And we could divert the resources to some other thing. So that went well. Can it be fixed? So we'll see about that. Okay, so for some context, we're in Spain right now. We're somewhere around here in Madrid. This is the northeastern part, Catalonia, where I'm from. Okay, and the one in red are all of the municipalities that are managed, well, it's the red and the orange. So these two, Grupo Agbar, which is Aguas de Barcelona, is the company that I was working for in this project. They serve more than 4.5 million people with water in the Catalonia region and 3,200 square kilometers of municipality. So it's pretty big. Okay, so you have to understand that Barcelona is here, okay? And this is a company that started managing the Barcelona water. They were doing a good job. So they started to also take control of other areas. Many of these areas had their own software systems that they had to integrate. Big mess. Okay, I'm sorry for all the ChatGPT images. I didn't have time to draw them myself. So just imagine all these systems trying to get interconnected together. Managing water is pretty critical because water rots. And if you don't have enough water in one place, then you have to move it from somewhere else. But if you have too much in one place and you don't move it, then it rots, so you have to be moving it around. So there's like interoperability of systems was a big thing. And what they wanted was to create an integrated ERP to kind of take all of this out of the way and replace it with something that is integrated, a vertical water management ERP that they would later on want to sell to other companies around the world. So it was a big project for them, and they set up a team. So we have Agbar, which is the water management utility company, that went on a joint venture with Sage. This one, you all know about this one, right? So Sage is a competitor for SAP, probably the most well-known ERP vendor in the world. They're pretty big, and they've grown by acquiring companies. One of the companies they acquired was a Spanish ERP that is that team. Okay, so that team was one of the acquisitions from Sage that had their own ERP, and they wanted to reuse their knowledge and their system to build a vertical water management ERP specifically for them, but that could be used for other companies. And this Aqualogy is the company that manages all the software systems for Agbar. There's a big group. Okay, that's the 70 people, most of which, so like all of the ones in the back, like the ones in the front are sponsors and people from Agbar, like the big bosses. All the ones in the back, almost everybody there, around 70 people, were people that came from the Sage acquisition, and they had a joint venture in order to build this new system. Okay. And this is an old system that they had. They had been building this ERP for probably since the 80s. It was pretty old. The way it was built was a waterfall approach. The team said they were doing Scrum. They had even some Scrum masters in the teams, but like you start scratching the surface, it's more like Scrunch than Scrum. And they had deadlines. Obviously, they had deadlines, program management, etc. They wanted to finish. The whole thing had to be done in 3 years' time, which means like, oh, we have plenty of time, right? But they were scared already 3 years ahead of time, and they said, we need to go at least twice as fast as we're going now. And like, there's a book by Ken Schwaber saying, we can do this, right? So I'm like, let's do this. Let's go twice as fast. So the proposal, in order to achieve an ERP integrated for replacing everything else, was to start using, I'm sorry for this image, I couldn't do any better. That was supposed to be a bunch of different teams of surfers surfing different waves in parallel, delivering coolness to the world. And yep, that's what happened. And I proposed using LeSS because there was quite a large team. They had 70 people working in parallel. The teams were structured for like front-end teams, back-end teams, QA teams, so it was siloed or component teams. And I proposed that. So how did we actually go into that? Has anybody read this book? It was pretty popular in Spain in like 2012, I think. Inception deck? Oh, well, no, sorry, the Agile Samurai. And one of the things they propose in there is what they call the Inception deck. I used this as inspiration, and I kind of modified it through the years. And it's basically, I call it the 3 I's. Ideation is making sure that we all understand what we're trying to build. And once we have interest, so ideation is about showing whether there's interest or not, then we have a business case. That's the inception part. We decide whether we want to fund this initiative or not. And once we have funding, we kick off working agreements, we set up the workplace, and we kickstart the whole thing. So I guided them through this process, because even though the project was already ongoing, they had the budget and all of these things, they realized that a lot of the team members had no idea what they were building. They thought they were building software or an ERP, but they didn't really understand the business, so it was also a process of getting everybody on board and sharing knowledge. So I have a bunch of pictures here. This is the space. A key ingredient for making this work at that point in time was that they had a huge 500 square meter room. That's the one. So imagine this. This is 500 square meters. You've seen a picture before. There was a projector here, all the chairs. We had tables that we could move around, and the doors. And this space allowed us to do a lot of the LeSS meetings by having everybody together, because we could easily fit 70 plus, 100 plus people in there and collaborate, spread them out into groups. The sound was way better than here. So even though they were speaking in parallel, they could still hear one another. Yes? Huh? Yes, they were all working. So this was a big room next to a building where they had the offices. And that helped a lot. Okay, that's me in the past, in the middle. Oh my God. All right, so I wasn't alone. We had 2 other facilitators for this project. She's an expert in innovation and getting people to collaborate and work out design thinking problems, and he was a colleague of mine in Agile, etc. Okay, we started with a presentation. So, okay, a little bit. The inception, we don't want this to take months. So we brought everyone together for 2 full days to do this exercise. And you'll see all the pictures right now, and I'll guide you through it. The first stage was the sponsor here. So this guy, he's one of the big, I think he was the CTO of the Akbar group. So big heavyweight. He was putting his weight behind this, and he was explaining what the vision was for the product. A lot of these people had been working here, and they didn't really understand the vision. So that was the first time that they had heard him in a meeting, probably, after probably months or even a year already working on this. And then we had a lot of icebreakers. And the icebreakers were not just at the beginning of the session to get everybody to kind of like mingle, etc. We would, between the exercises, it was 2 full days of workshop. Between the exercises, we were thinking, okay, what kind of energy do we want them to have? And we would put an exercise or an icebreaker right before that so that they would get in the mood. And you can see here, for example, there's some that are more fun, there's others that are more like ordering things. We have more here for like finding creative solutions to things. They had collaboration by flipping the paper. There were a lot of different activities that we interspersed between the workshops in order to get them in the right mindset. And we checked for what their expectations were and how satisfied they were so far. So that was at the beginning of first day. Expectations are quite spread out. So like there's people with a lot of expectations, people with few expectations, but nobody is very satisfied. Maybe that guy. Okay, that's it. Imagine this. The day that they came to the workshop, they opened the doors, they came into a huge space, which had a bunch of things in the walls, but they were all empty. So it's kind of like, oh my God, are we gonna have to fill all of this in 2 days? It was a bit daunting for them, and we assured them that they would have the time to fill it all out. And then think about when they finished, all of that filled, just remember that, keep it in mind, it was all empty at the beginning. We started with an exercise that is remembering the future. I don't know if you've ever done this exercise. You want them to vision together. So we put them out into groups. This is what they came up with, but I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures of them working in teams. We shuffled them around, and we tried to make them be cross-functional teams. So we would have them get into groups by role, and then we'd say each of the roles go to one of the table, and so we would want to make sure that each table was cross-functional. That doesn't mean they were going to be the next team, but I wanted them to kind of collaborate with one another, have different viewpoints, and working on this together. And here we have so it was a newspaper cover that we were supposed to design of what it would be like to be successful, and remembering that from 20 years in the future. This was our most successful project. What would it look like? Get into the mode of thinking, what do we want to achieve? This is the ideation phase. Then we did an elevator pitch. So there we had different teams kind of come up with parts of the elevator pitch using the template by, what's his name? Jürgen Appelo. You've seen the template? It's a boring template. But if you want to have almost 100 people align on something, having a template helps. So it wasn't a fun template, but it was easier than for me to facilitate that. I'm here with all the post-it notes that they had been coming up. It's like some have a lot of things and kind of grouping it together and finally coming up with something that was later on written here. So let me see, how am I doing in time? All right. So what it says there, it's in Spanish, so I'll translate. So it's for the managers of the water cycle, integral water cycle managers, which need to manage the operations and the terrain in a sustainable way that is also easy and efficient. The AquasysOM, great name. Like marketing wasn't there strong. AquasysOM is a solution that is innovative, scalable, multi-platform, and easy to use. And they put in there that is a market leader. That brings improvements in the water planning and brings about a 360 vision of the state of the operations to improving our service quality. As opposed to other solutions and they talked about Maximo, Click, and Born to be Like Water, which are alternatives, our product is user-friendly, attractive, and a lot of other stuff that is a bit too small. I'm not going to read all of it. Okay, so that was the first time that they came together and they participated into the vision. And the main stakeholders and the sponsors were also there, and this was interesting for them to view. Then, this is a product box example. I brought in boxes, so the real thing, you can buy them online, create the boxes, give boxes to every team, and have them prepare a box as if the product was to be sold in a supermarket. So you see here, you'd have the cover with some diagram, the main benefits, technical details in the back, and risks on the side. And they worked on this, different teams, and we had a bunch of boxes. Helps align on the ideas. Right? We're trying to bring them together to have a shared understanding of what this is about. We weren't trying to check whether there was, so if I had done this in a greenfield project, this would have been used to check if people actually care about this, but we already knew because we had the budget, so this was just to align people. And then we went into analyzing the types of users that we'd have in this system. Okay, they will always think about users as a generic thing, but there's a lot of different types of users of this sort of ERP. First, they did a brainstorm, and then we started grouping together in order to have user type categories. And we did user personas for the main ones. So let me see, we have here the operations manager, the user that does checks on the system to like request data. We had the person in charge of parameterizing the ERP for a new area of operation. We have the manager, the persons fixing things when they go wrong, the subcontractors that fix things when they go wrong and I don't have enough people that I can send to that area, and systems administration. And we did a user persona there in order to better understand these people, because there were potentially hundreds of these users, and we weren't going to be able to bring them into our refinement sessions. We weren't going to be able to bring them into our review meetings. So at least we wanted to have an understanding of what their pain points were. And we did also the empathy maps. So for the top 3 most important roles, we did empathy maps, and we shared them out here. And then we checked. So this is at the end of the first day. The expectations had like moved this way, but they also moved up in terms of satisfaction. So people were actually enjoying this process. Being brought in, at the beginning they were like, oh, what are we gonna do? Think about the money. 70 people for 2 days, plus all the stakeholders coming in, having some of them had to fly in from Madrid to Barcelona. This was a big amount of money that it's hard to justify ahead of time, but then when you start seeing that people are actually satisfied and they're learning new things, this was quite eye-opening, especially for the sponsors and the stakeholders, like coming to the realization of how little the teams knew about the business was like, oh my God, I've been telling them things that to me are just second nature and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So that was really good. And then we did a stakeholder map, because for a big project like this one, it was millions of budget, and they had to change the systems that were being used for a lot of people. If you don't take into account your stakeholders, then chances are you're gonna mess up somewhere. Have you seen this stakeholder map tool before? Yeah, anybody need me to explain? No? All right, cool. Huh? No, personas were for user types. We didn't do personas here. Yeah, you could. You could. We didn't do them again. So here we did the stakeholder map, and for the key people in there that we wanted to make sure that we had a proper communication plan, we did communication plans. I don't know if you can see it there, but basically a communication plan means that for each type of communication you want to say who is the audience, what is the objective, what channel you'll be using, what is the content, how frequently, and who is going to be doing the communication. Okay, so for the main things that we wanted to communicate to the people in the stakeholder map, we defined together a communication plan. And this is the communication plan that was recorded. And then came the tougher part, because this was a project that was ongoing, and when I joined this company, they had been trying to estimate how much work it would be. It had been 3 months already, them trying to estimate, do like analysis, requirement gathering, etc. And I told them we could do this in an hour. maybe no, it was 2. Like the estimation of how much work it would be was an hour. Thanks to Jürgen Desmet for tips. And then we did buy a feature. Here I used these little things to assess risk. I would give them each. And by the end, we had all the table. We estimated the cost, and we kind of on the back said what the cost was, risk, not cost, risk, and how much money had been invested on that, which we would later use, especially the product owner, in order to assess how much, like where to prioritize things. Okay, and this is the review. So by the end of the second day, the stakeholders and the sponsors came back because not everybody was able to stay for the 2 days. So they came back at the end of the second day, and we reviewed with them. So this was the product owner kind of explaining. We went to the elevator pitch, product box, the status, the empathy maps, personas, everything. We just went through everything. We explained it to them so they knew what we had been doing. And when they came in, they had left the meeting on the first day in the morning when everything was empty. They came on the second day, everything was packed of Post-it notes, colors, and work, and the energy was still vibrant. And they gave a speech about, like, for closing. Okay, so that was the inception, making sure that everybody was aligned on what we had to do. Then we started, and yeah, it got better by the end of the second day, so we kind of managed to improve satisfaction. There were still some people that weren't satisfied, but like it's more sparse down here. We did a retrospective. We gathered feedback in a feedback wall. We did a pluses and deltas, something very simple, because after each big meeting that we had, the facilitators and the Scrum Masters would get together in order to have like a retro about how the meeting had gone. That's a good practice that I recommend. Don't wait to have retrospectives at the end of the sprint. Have retrospectives for all the big meetings that you're scaling. Okay, then we went into team formation. We first was to make sure that everybody knew, like we defined what a perfect team would be. And we consented as a group to what characteristics a perfect team would have, that is cross-functional, that is able to deliver on their own, that is autonomous, et cetera, et cetera. Once we defined this, we asked for consent. When they consented, we said, all right, let's make a proposal. So just move around and figure out who should be with each team. We did this 4 different times, and for each time, I took pictures of them on a Polaroid camera, so that we could have them revealed and so like the different options. The Polaroid camera was a really bad idea. It takes way longer for the picture to come out than I expected, so don't do Polaroid, just like first tip. And we put them all up, the 3 or 4 examples, and we told them, vote with your feet, which do you think is your preferred option? The least voted option, we removed. Those people had to move somewhere else. When there were 2 left, we had pretty much 50-50. And then instead of having them vote and win by 50+1, which we thought was a bad idea, there's this sentence that is used in sociocracy that I really like. It's not either or, it's both and more. So I asked them, like, how could we get the best of both scenarios? And together we came up with a merge of the 2 options. And those were the teams that started working as of the next sprint. And we started doing less. For the last meetings, we would go to the same big room, and for planning, we would have the product owner auction out items. Like, okay, who's taking this one? Who's taking that one? And the teams were sitting in different tables. So when they were handed over, then we did some, like if they had dependencies, we had a dependency board, they would exchange dependencies, and then they did the second part of the planning without having to move. Everybody was there. We would also auction out the items that they would have to refine during the sprint for the next sprint in order to make them ready. But we had a common definition of ready and common definition of done. So sometimes you refine something that you weren't going to end up doing, but still somebody had to refine it. And they would refine it during the sprint, and we had a refinement meeting with stakeholders that we did a bit of, we did trial and error there. What ended up working best for us was having all the stakeholders in a big table there, and all the developers and all the teams kind of like trying to refine, and when they had questions, they went and they queued up and asked, because our problem was that we had way more developers than we had stakeholders to answer the questions, and if the stakeholders had to move around, which we tried at the beginning, that wasn't working. So we had the stakeholders sitting in the same place, developers would come with questions, and stakeholders could ask each other because they were sitting in the same table. And that worked pretty well. Then we would have daily scrums, and we also did a scaled daily scrum. I'm not very, I don't have a lot of pride of having done that, but it kind of worked. So we had scrum masters and team leads come together every day after a daily scrum and share dependencies, basically, or things that they were working on that could impact other teams. And at the end, we had a sprint review, which we use a fair format. So each team would set up a stand explaining what they were presenting, and stakeholders would just walk around and ask for demos. And finally, we did a retrospective in 2 steps. Each team had a retrospective, then we had the overall retrospective. Nothing new under the sun. So, 3 sprints later, I just wanted to do that. We realized that at the speed or velocity at which we were consuming things from the backlog, we would take 9 years to finish everything. And it had to be done in 3. So it's like, oh shit. I've done the numbers right now. And that meant that we canceled the project at this time with the big team, and we went back to a single team. So what went wrong? First of all, we didn't know how to do delivery at a large scale. We didn't know how to have different teams delivering in parallel together. They just didn't know that. The technical skill set was quite lacking. That drop is as good as I get in terms of animations. They didn't know what I had meetings with the senior developers. They didn't know what solid was. They weren't using proper naming conventions. Automating testing was like science fiction. So all of this was not there. Scaling didn't make sense. I mean, it was obviously going to fail. And they were trying to run when they hadn't gotten the walking down from Scrum. They weren't doing good Scrum, and then we scaled, and that didn't work out. Plus, in terms of scope negotiation, it was non-existent. The scope is like, everything has to be done, period. If you can't negotiate scope, then it's just the mindset wasn't there. They were still thinking from a waterfall approach, everything has to be done, and we can't release iteratively and incrementally. And the product owner was just a proxy. She had all the requirements down, and she had to get them all done. She didn't have a lot of leeway in terms of prioritization or even descoping. So we went back to one team. Basically, everybody else got moved out to another project because it was a joint venture. And we stayed with one team, and I tried to train them to do proper development. So we went on training, and we did a lot of mob programming for a sprint. So 1 week of training, 1 week of mob programming together. They started to learn how to do tests, et cetera, et cetera. We continued working with them for a bit, but it wasn't enough. We still weren't going fast enough. The improvements weren't there. But at least we had reduced the amount of money that we were spending in this project from 70 people to 7 people. So, okay, even cheaper experiment to fail. So in the end, we ended up sending this to a team they had in Alicante that was much better team. They realized that they had to downscale and find good developers that had done something similar in the past, that knew the modern development practices, and start the project from over there. So I don't know if you've read the book, but there's a book by Craig Larman and Barcelona that says that their advice for multi-site offshore development is basically don't do it. There are ways that, I'm going to read that, there are better ways to build large-scale systems than with many developers in many places. Rather, build a small group of great developers and other talents that can work together in teams, pay them well, and keep them together in one place. And just, that was an expensive learning, but they learned it. It doesn't always happen. And that's it. I don't know if I have time for questions. Yeah? Okay. Any questions?
Did this restart work out well?
The what?
The restart with the new team?
It worked better because this was a team that, so at one point they tried to bring in the senior developer from that team to try to fix things in our teams, but they just realized that just one person wasn't going to be able to change the way 50 or even 10 people worked. And he said, like, I have a team that I've been working with in the past. We could probably do this. So there was a political thing that until they realized that it wasn't going to be possible to run it with the team in Barcelona, they weren't ready to send the project somewhere else. Yeah.
How long did you work with the 70 people then?
70 people, I think it was around 2 months. Yeah. Mhm.
Could have been 2 years before you finished.
That's what would have happened if we hadn't tried this. Yeah. They had been 3 months trying to just give an estimate. 3 months.
And in 2 months you showed.
In 2 months, I said it's not possible, and they fired me. Anyways, yeah.
So did you still keep on having DORs as a construct and the Scrum of Scrum kind of thing, or?
Yeah, we had a shared definition of ready and a shared definition of done. Yes, that we agreed on during the team formation process.
Why did you have a DOR?
Because sometimes teams that raise their hand for refining something are not as fast as building what they thought they had to build, so they refine something, and then in the next sprint planning, they don't have the capacity to take it. It's still priority, so another team has to take it. I want to make sure that no matter what team refined it, it's still ready for any other team to take on. It's not ideal, but since it's a priority, I want somebody else to take it if they can't take it themselves. The ideal is that whoever refines it ends up executing. That's the ideal because there's less knowledge transfer.
That's why we have multi-team product backlog defined. So because
Yeah.
actually you don't want to have a DOR unless it is seen as a dysfunction, etc.
I would agree that a definition of ready is a dysfunction in almost any Scrum team, not only less, but these were pretty dysfunctional. So I needed to have some basic understanding together as what does it mean to refine something.
But just saying that if you do a change
Mhm.
and you allow several of those kind of small, which appear to be small, dysfunctional things,
Mhm.
in cumulative, you might create a system which will not work
Mhm.
because these individual parts don't interact properly. They are not
Okay.
designed for that. So if you have a DOR and you have a dependency meeting, however this is called, then you actually try to manage dependencies, and
Mhm.
this is like a symptom, it's quick fix, instead of actually going there and doing the
Yeah.
root cause solving.
Mhm.
But it failed for other reasons before.
Yeah, we never got to fixing that.
Yes,
Yeah. Any other questions?
So how much money have they made until today by selling this product to other companies?
I doubt that they've sold it, and they wouldn't have told me anyways. But I really doubt that they would sell it, mainly because, think of it strategically. If you're a water management company in the south of Spain, and you buy the system from the company in the north of Spain, then when the next, every 5 years, the water management company goes up for soliciting. There's a I don't know how you say it in English, but if the company from Barcelona says, "Oh, they're using our system, we know how to use it, so it's very easy for us to take over." So I wouldn't want to make it easier for another company to take over my piece of land. That's why I think it's strategically difficult to happen. In other countries, maybe.
But they have finished the product.
Yes. Yeah, this was many years ago. So they have finished the product. They've managed to change it to the new system. Yes. And I think you had a question.
I know to prepare this kind of transition is really hard and a lot of work. What are your personal learnings from the journey?
Oh, my personal learning is that I would first start with don't change. I wouldn't change the teams at the beginning anymore. I would try to get them to make sure they know how to do Scrum better, work on the underlying technical practices so that when they do the switch, the dependencies don't kill them. Because what happened here is that when they switched, they had all these teams working in parallel, but they didn't know how to work in a shared code base, et cetera, and that killed them, basically. So that's my main learning. You're welcome. Yep.
You said they fired you?
Yeah, but I was an external consultant, so they stopped needing me.
But it's not like they blamed it on you, or
I didn't feel that way.
did they also see it as good to learn the bad news after 2 months?
So I was in a meeting where I was with the CEO of this ecology thing and his boss I was in Barcelona. And basically we were sharing how things were going. I said, I don't think we're gonna make it, et cetera, et cetera. And this part of the meeting where I was there was kind of polite. Then the moment I stood up and started leaving, the boss started to scream at the other one. So yeah. There was blaming for sure, but at least I didn't get screamed at.
Who hired you?
The person that was being screamed at. Yeah. He was because it was a big group of companies, so he was the CEO of that area. Yeah. Well, the joint venture. Any other questions? No? All right, thank you.